It's really exciting being back with a new album because it feels like such a long time since Are We There Yet? I mean, it's only been a few years, but it feels like much longer.
You're sweeter than honey, sweeter than honey, sweeter than honey, honey, I'm sticking with you.
As soon as Are We There Yet was not finished, because no album's ever finished, but the tour had finished, I had to start obviously thinking about the next album, and all these massive things were happening, and you know, from just a discussion with my partner about having a baby, then the song Baby Chicken arrived, and that was me sort of processing, you know, that this is going to happen, that, you know, if, you know, this is what life's going to be like, and about, you know, life changing. And then we went to New York thinking, right, this will be our last holiday, just us. And then as soon as we flew back from there, we started the IVF process, and all I've ever known was the song that evolved from the trip to coming back and starting, you know, starting the IVF process. And I don't think either of us could have been prepared for how difficult and emotional and expensive.
So we can go from paper into gold, stand in New York City in the cold. Loving you is all I'll ever know, and it's all I've ever known.
My partner said to me, like, in particular, do not write an album about having a baby. You're not Adele. You can't get away with that. No one wants to hear it. I had written songs before about my grandpa because he was the most interesting man I'd ever met. He was the fastest hypnotist in Britain. He was a magician. He toured with my gran, who was an opera singer. He was, you know, this fascinating, amazing man. But I'd always thought there was a real song behind the letters that he wrote home during the war. And I dug them out, and I was sitting reading them, and they're really quite hard to read because they're on paper rations, so the writing's really tiny. But I did notice that he signed them Yours I, which I wasn't entirely sure what that meant. He was writing to his mum and to his sister, and I asked a friend of mine, Rab Noakes, I was like, what does Yours I mean? And he says, it's yours always, because he always signed off his emails to me and as I. And so I thought, well, he'll know. And they also said in it, he said, for the love of Mike, don't send LSD. And I was thinking, but why would they send drugs during the war? Like, what, you know? And Rab also told me that that was money, you know, it wasn't drugs. So it's like, okay. But reading through these letters was really heartbreaking, but really interesting, because it did reflect my grandpa's personality. He was finding new treasures wherever he went and sort of trying to send them home, but, you know, they had no money. He was afraid, he'd been shot, and, you know, all these things, and it's like, I hope Mum's okay and all this kind of stuff. And it was just like, oh my God, he was just a kid. And the song Yours I just formed. In my head I was hearing this whole, I'm not a fighter, I'm just a boy sent out to war, just a reminder, and all that chorus was just like fitting together in my head, and I was like that. You know, I get like, it's actually a really exciting feeling, it's amazing. And then the way to open the song just was Dear Mother, and as soon as that came into my head, the song was there.
But I'm not a fighter, I'm just a boy sent out to war. I don't know what I'm fighting for. No more, no more.
I think that song felt like this week in a centre point, and I was like, okay, there's an album going to be pieced together, because it felt like a really, really strong song, but there was a sound around it that I thought, oh, that'd be nice. Like, so if we bring, you know, pedal steel and nice piano, and like I could hear how the drums would sound and things, and I was like, this is how I need this album to sound. So then I brought in like other songs that I'd written, and I was like, well, these fit, these don't, you know, because there's a couple and they felt like that, almost like a kind of gypsy jazz thing, and I was like, you know what, as much as I love doing all that, and songs like that are great at live shows, this album needs to be something. and you know, in my head I knew what that something was. I had a really clear direction, so everything that came after that just fitted all like a nice wee puzzle. It was great. Definitely after that song, I felt like it had given me a wee nudge of excitement again, and you know, it kind of like sparked up the songwriting, because you really can get into a situation like I do, and it's an anxiety thing where you panic and think, I'm never going to write another song, because you go a month with not an idea, with nothing. It's like your mind goes dormant and it doesn't want to do anything, and you're almost like, whoa, you know, but you can't force it, because if I force it I just get so frustrated. I'll sit down and go, oh, I can't write songs anymore, I'm rubbish.
If we didn't have sky, we wouldn't see blue. If we didn't have love, I wouldn't have you.
As people get older, as artists in any form, their work changes, definitely changes, and for me, my writing just felt that bit more mature. I felt like I had to grow up quite quickly, you know, be responsible, be, you know, like not as kind of fly by the seat of my pants type person, you know, the kind of person that would fly to America with no money and go and do some gigs and whatever and not care. And now I'm like, bills, this, you know, it's like, you know, I've had to grow up, so I think my writing has felt more mature, and even the music, you know, the last album was definitely the quirky me, and this album still has elements of that, but it really feels, it's not that it feels like a serious album, it just feels like a matured album. You know, musically musically it's very honest, and the writing's very honest, you know, as always for me, but there's definitely a shift in the sound of this album, and definitely a shift in the writing, because really big things, you know, happened. Personally, I think the shift is having to deal with things I've never had to deal with in my life. I didn't know what to expect having a baby. I didn't know what to expect going through IVF. I didn't know what to expect when you come home with this person and the two of you are looking going, what do we do? There's nothing really to tell you how this is going to be, how exhausted you're going to be, how much you're going to cry over nothing, you know. And I remember one time getting in the car, everyone says that these days and these days and these days you will just be an emotional wreck, and I was like, no, I won't, because everyone said people are maniacs when they're on all the hormones for IVF, and I actually think I was very even and not crazy. I was just myself, which is crazy. So that, you know, there was no change for me, but I just kept crying, and I know a lot of time I was thinking, I hope I can get a song out of this, because this is torture.
Have you ever seen a world like this one? I've never seen a world like this one.
My songwriting process has been the same since I was 12, and that is that I genuinely don't have any control over the songs forming. A melody will build in my head, and I have to leave it be. I can't force it at all. A melody will form, and then lines kind of come out of that melody, and then the song will start piecing itself together. And that can sometimes happen in an hour, it can sometimes happen in a week, it can sometimes happen in a month. But for a song to go down onto paper, I have to wait till it's all there. I'm not a person that will spend, you know, a week on a verse. I can't do that. I think when you're putting an album together, if I look at the last album, there was really different influences in there and different styles, but it felt like one album. A massive thing is the track list and how that album flows from start to finish. I think the way I love to make an album is to go in with the musicians, play it, you know, and then everyone obviously fixes all the wee bits, and you know, your finished product should flow from start to finish. With this album, it definitely was Going into the studio, I used Boo Hewardine again because I loved what he brought to the last album. I'm very in control of what's happening in the studio. I know exactly what I want, exactly how I want it to sound. I go in over-prepared because I have to, because making an album is so expensive that I have these, short windows of time that it has to be done in. So it's a bit military, if you want to put it like that, which is funny with the Yours I thing. But the common thread throughout the album is, for one, the vocal and the vocal sound, and then it's the musicians and using the same musicians start to finish. I love when you listen to like a Brandi Carlile album and it flows start to finish. You know that they have had the same musicians, producer, for the most part the studio. The album was recorded between London and Glasgow, mostly in Glasgow, but the vocals were so crucial to this album that I had asked Boo who is the best person to work with for vocal sound, and he suggested a producer called John Kelly, who's worked with Kate Bush and Richard Ashcroft, Paul McCartney, things like that. So I went down to do a kind of wee trial run with him, which ended up just being amazing, and we put down the vocals to half the album. What we did is we took the ones that were this sort of really intense songs and we did the vocals for them, and we brought in a pedal steel player called Melvin Duffy who's worked with First Aid Kit, and he played on those tracks as well. And before anything else had even been put on them, they sounded incredible. The vocal sound was absolutely amazing, and it didn't fail to deliver what Boo had said it would. The rest of the album was recorded at Chem 19 Studios. That was tricky because the rest of the album didn't get recorded until during lockdown, and it was literally sitting waiting for a window where they said studios can open again with a lot of restrictions, and I was like, book. I need to just like book it and get in there. Everyone was in with masks. There was a different feeling. We couldn't have too many people in. Boo couldn't even come in. He did it virtually, but it worked really, really well.
I will do anything you need. I will go black and blue and bleed, but I'll never run, never run, never run out. Forget what you think you know of me. Get out of your head, I'd never cheat, 'cause I wouldn't do that. No, I wouldn't do that.
When I demo songs for the albums and send the tracks to the musicians, previously what I've done is, it might be a bit kind of controlling, but demo the songs completely with all the parts on them, literally all the parts, and then the musicians just come in and play all of those parts. But I left a bit of freedom with this album, and maybe there was particular riffs in some of the songs, and they had to be played the way that I really wanted them to be played. But with other songs, I said to the band, I gave them reference tracks and said, I'd like this to sound a bit like this, and the guitar sounds or particular drum sounds. The drum sounds on the album to me is really crucial, especially on this album. And I have a fantastic drummer, Paul Crawford, who is really kind of inventive the way he plays. He thinks about everything, and he's really creative with things. Like, he brought in these, it's like walnut shells for one of the songs, and you hear this kind of clicky sound, and it's literally him just dropping them onto his hand, things like that they're so subtle, but they add so much to an album. I'd sent the drummer Paul, I sent him some kind of reference tracks, and he said, I was thinking the feel to be a bit kind of Jay Belrose, and I was like, well, that's exactly what I want. And he's played on Raisin Sands, he's played on Wheeler Montaigne's albums, and he plays this insane drum kit. He's got percussion around his feet and everything like that when he plays. He's just incredible, and Paul really brought that feel and that sound to the album. Connor Smith, the guitarist, really worked out the most beautiful parts for all the songs, and he put so much thought into really specific things, like on the song Lay You Down, because that song is about having a new baby. Again, you would probably not really know that listening to the song, but he said he wanted the guitar sound to be a bit like a music box, so he put a piece of paper up through the strings of the guitar, and then when he was picking, it gave this really unusual sound, and this kind of arpeggiated way that he played sounded like a music box. Even just putting thought like that into it, to me, is just why I use these particular musicians. And by pure chance, the days that we were in recording all the band parts, a grand piano had been left in the studio. Johnny McKinnon, my piano player, he was like, oh, he's tried a lot of pianos in his time, and he was like, he said, this is unreal to play, and it sounded mic'd it all up, and it just sounded gorgeous, and that was maybe a bit of luck. I really love Little Red Car, and it's not that it's not my favourite song on the album. It was the songs, I've never done an album with like 11 songs on it. It feels so odd and unsettling to my OCD, but Little Red Car was written just before going down to do all the vocals and everything, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to record this down here because it's new, it feels really fresh, and I'd like to, you know, if there's an opportunity to work with John Kelly, I'll put it down and see what it sounds like. And I played it and sang it, and the kind of reaction from him and from Boo was really positive and a bit genuine, and I was like, I wonder if that should go on the album. But when I was in recording it, I played the guitar part and that was fine, and then I went in to do the vocals, and I felt so emotional to do the vocals that I had to like sit down for a minute and just sort of collect my thoughts and just think, right, I can't detach myself from the song because then I can't deliver the song, but I have to kind of figure out a way to sing it because it just brings this memory of, you know, the last days with someone and all those events that happened, and that is really, really hard to sing about. So it's probably for me the most powerful song for me emotionally.
Think as years have passed that I could speak your name without feeling my heart is breaking all over again. Your little cute house, your little red car, the little boy who needs to know how beautiful you are will tell him about you.
The song Baby Chicken, I think, as well, because I really wanted to do something with that feel, that slightly bluegrassy Alison Krauss thing with the really lovely harmonies in the chorus, and that kind of the feel that jumps from verse to chorus as well, and it really picks up. And you know, as much as it starts off sounding quite serious, and it's about preparing yourself for that. And you know, it's different because people can prepare for having a family and then they try and have a family, and that's one thing. But in my situation, you're preparing yourself for IVF, and the chances are so low that it's a different preparation. You kind of have to prepare yourself for it not working. And so that song was the most hopeful song I could ever have written.
One baby chicken in the bedroom light, kiss him on the head and you tuck him in tight. One baby chicken and you sing goodnight, life will never be the same. One day, baby, when you're old and tired, with your feet up in a chair and the burner all fired up, oh, baby chicken will be there sometimes. Funny how life's changed.